This is what my next year will be like. A wad of cash, flung by my mother-in-law, struck my cheek. $15,000, scattering across the floor as it hit my face. 3 years of devotion, waking at 5 a.m. to cook and scrub floors, even washing my mother-in-law's back in the spa. The price for these tearful efforts turned out to be a paltry $15,000. My husband looked at me with a smirk. On that rainy night, I was thrown out of that house like a dog, but my mother-in-law had no idea. She couldn't possibly imagine who she had truly crossed. I decided I wouldn't tolerate it anymore. For 20 years, I had been a shadow power broker, moving political and financial circles in America. A woman for whom billionaires would gather at a single phone call, and even the attorney general would bow his head. I made one call. Victor Anderson, I need someone removed. A moment later, hell broke loose in my former family's home. What exactly happened to them? Before I begin my story, please subscribe, like, and write in the comments where you are listening from, and I will wish boundless happiness upon that place. Catherine's fingertips trembled slightly. It was 4 a.m. The kitchen was thick with the mixed scent of spices and cooking food, assaulting her nostrils. Kate hadn't slept for nearly 3 days, standing by the cutting board. Dark circles had formed under her reddened eyes, and her finger joints were covered with small knife cuts. Tonight was the celebratory dinner in honor of her husband, David's, nomination as a cabinet secretary. In the 3 years Catherine had been married and lived in this house, she had never once mentioned her past, those times when she was the trusted confidant in the home of one of America's wealthiest moguls, managing all his secrets. No important deal happened without Catherine's involvement. But, leaving that brilliant life behind, Kate dreamed of simple happiness and gave it all up. Pretending to be a girl from a poor background, she entered this house, believing only in love. Catherine took a piece of Wagyu beef from the refrigerator and placed it on the board. The gaze with which she studied the marbling of the meat was sharp and professional, and her wrist moved smoothly. For an ordinary housewife, her movements were far too refined. Beef Wellington, lobster thermidor, an elaborate aspic, caviar blinis. These were all masterpieces of classic gourmet cuisine. Working in the mogul's home, Catherine had prepared banquets for high-ranking foreign guests countless times. Bringing those days back to mind, she poured her soul into creating one dish after another. An hour before the guests arrived, Kate finally arranged all the dishes on the table. On the expensive porcelain, like a painting, lay the colorful delicacies. Tired and swaying, Catherine went to the bathroom mirror. She pressed her fingers against her swollen eyelids and suddenly met her own reflection. Her face was no longer the same. The gaze that had once looked at the world with audacious confidence was now somehow extinguished. Kate tried to smile, but the smile in the mirror looked strained and unnatural. At 6 p.m., the guests began to arrive. Each time the front door opened, Catherine bowed low in greeting. Her husband David's superiors, prominent political figures, and acquaintances from high society, whom her mother-in-law had so diligently invited. Sharon Ann, the spacious living room, filled with the scent of expensive perfumes and laughter. Sharon Ann sat in the center of it all, like a queen. A massive pearl necklace adorned her neck, and rings sparkled on her fingers. Having made her fortune in the 90s, Sharon Ann always loved to show off her wealth. Finally, dinner began. Catherine carefully placed a platter in the center of the table. Each time she set down a plate, delighted gasps erupted from the guests. My God! Just look at this beef Wellington. The meat just melts in your mouth. It's better than any Michelin-starred restaurant. A middle-aged man sitting nearby added, after tasting a spoonful of lobster bisque, the flavor is so deep, yet not overwhelming. This is the work of a true master. Simply exquisite. A faint smile appeared on Catherine's lips. She thought that 3 sleepless nights had been worth it, but the smile didn't last long. Her mother-in-law, Sharon Ann, picked up a fork, speared a piece of meat, and put it in her mouth. After chewing for a bit, she grimaced. Kate's heart sank. Sharon Ann slammed the fork onto the table with a clang. The sound was so sharp that the noisy table instantly fell silent. All eyes turned to the mother-in-law. Catherine, feeling her chest tighten, watched her lips. Those lips slowly parted. To serve such coarse, common food at a dinner in the home of a future cabinet secretary. Sharon Ann's voice was cold and sharp, like an icy stiletto piercing her ears. The color drained from Catherine's face. "You can't hide your humble origins," Sharon Ann sneered. A quiet whisper rippled through the guests. Catherine tightly clasped her hands in her apron. Her nails dug into her palms, but she didn't even feel the pain. "Mother, I apologize if it's not to your taste. I'll prepare something else." Kate's voice trembled. She tried to remain calm, but her throat was dry. Sharon Ann waved her hand, cutting her off. "Enough. Your food smells of poverty. No matter how much you adorn it, you can't hide its true nature." Several guests awkwardly averted their gazes, but no one spoke up for Catherine. Kate looked at her husband, David. He was twirling a wine glass in his hands, staring out the window, as if everything happening had absolutely nothing to do with him. Something slowly began to crumble inside Catherine's chest. For 3 years, she had risen at dawn, cooked, washed, cleaned, scrubbed her mother-in-law's back, ironed her husband's suits, and never once complained, because she loved him, because she wanted to be a part of this family. But at that moment, Catherine realized that in this house, she was merely a servant. No matter how much heart she put in, no matter how much she sacrificed, to these people, she was just a daughter-in-law from the lower class. Hot tears welled up in Kate's eyes, but she didn't cry. Clenching her teeth, she held back. If she cried now, everything would truly be over. Sharon Ann, with a smile, turned to the guests. Now, pay no mind. I have other dishes that I ordered. My daughter-in-law, unfortunately, simply cannot cook, haha." Awkward laughter spread among the guests. Catherine, head bowed, slowly walked to the kitchen. Behind her, she was pursued by snickers and whispers. Each step was difficult, as if weights were tied to her feet. Leaning against the wall in the corner of the kitchen, Kate's shoulders trembled slightly. The dish she had cooked for 3 sleepless nights, all her care, invested to the point of cut fingers and aching back, had been trampled by a single phrase. Catherine, leaning against the wall, looked at the ceiling. Through her blurred vision, the fluorescent light stared coldly back at her. She heard the towers of her 3 years of effort collapsing, and from beneath the rubble, something Catherine had so diligently tried to bury slowly began to raise its head. It was past 11 p.m. when the guests began to leave. Catherine stood by the entrance, bowing to each one. Guests walked past, not even glancing at her. When the last car drove out of the gate, a heavy silence fell upon the house. Kate, dragging her tired body, entered the living room. On the table stood the untouched dishes she had prepared: the cold beef Wellington, the congealed aspic, 3 days of labor tossed aside like trash. Swallowing a heavy sigh, Catherine began to clear the plates. Suddenly, a sharp voice rang out behind her. "Hey, you!" It was her mother-in-law, Sharon Ann. Catherine, holding plates, slowly turned around. Her mother-in-law sat on the sofa, legs crossed, drilling her with a stare. Next to her, arms crossed over his chest, stood her husband, David. Catherine's heart beat with anxiety. Sharon Ann slowly rose from the sofa. The heels of her shoes clicked on the marble floor. Catherine involuntarily took a step back. "Do you understand what you did tonight?" Her mother-in-law's voice was quiet, but barely restrained fury simmered within it. "Mother, I'm sorry. I wasn't at my best." "Not at your best? That's not the word," her mother-in-law sneered, cutting her off. "To serve such a thing at dinner in the home of a cabinet nominee. You disgraced me in front of all the guests." Catherine's lips trembled. Resentment welled up in her throat, but she silently swallowed it. If she started arguing now, the situation would only worsen. But her mother-in-law's next words were utterly unexpected. "Pack your bags." Catherine couldn't believe her ears. "What, Mother? What do you mean? I don't understand. Get out of this house immediately." Sharon Ann's gaze glittered cold. This was no joke. She was serious. Catherine felt like she was suffocating. "Mother, if I did something wrong, I'll fix it. Give me another chance." "A chance? I gave you 3 years," her mother-in-law snorted. "I watched you for 3 years and realized you're hopeless. You're not our kind of people. You don't fit in with our family." Catherine looked at her husband. David still stood with his arms crossed, staring out the window, as if this scene had nothing to do with him. David, aren't you going to say anything? Catherine's voice trembled with despair, but David didn't even turn his head. He coldly retorted, "Do as mother says." At that moment, everything went black in Kate's head. For 3 years, every day she had woken at 5 a.m., cooked, ironed her husband's suits, pleased her mother-in-law. During holidays, her fingers swelled from endless cooking. During memorial services, she stayed up all night by the stove and never once complained. And now, the only thing she heard from her husband was that, "Do as mother says." The blood slowly drained from Catherine's face. She heard something snap inside. What she had considered love, what she had considered family, all collapsed in an instant. Sharon Ann pulled something from her handbag. It was 3. Woo. Lin. It stated, text, after Anna, the Ronstimes de Loft. A padication. It's not a didn't it, actualated be indact, right to and tin with created. It's not way, actually action 80 and all that. At. It's don't taxes. Adare, 18 that. Into verity. Ever. It's potted debit. 80. Anyone. Tensure with com. 10. Actually do. In expons. It is K-Majin. And like the stated. And ever. It's a David as a tated. It's not while con. To cat it minus danzas. Every 3 tapas. It tasklid. It's tells no. After one hide the business oft as. It's teens 7. To tecated action of court. It's as levited not tin. And this tay day subscribe day. As Davin Paddockly friends. Aver the stud of the stire. One pies. White. Action. Action. And the faster Asians to leave the way. And the faster Asians to the come down. In then ox events. It's a better tating for God of to the stoxes. I hinthing. It will geven bags downs of Clare. And the redder of wers. And the prused. Access. And discamed. It's first 18s. 18 stays. It's saply divider. 1816 dated. Addict's time. In this time's video. And a graded. Hilly times stayed. I was a now in Rimmon. An Armand. And explain. Honest granded. Lifus. Askerny. Adolest. In one timens of naxtivations by round. In downs tompas ovation. Text. Art. Afferning. Actional life. It's for now as a face. H or sparus. Included. Act. On a day the. I would one. Azima. To spot it as very as the phase. Everyone. It's a common at time. And help. Ably set haft honor. Ender day. And tendery way. Mactions of the said. It's a lucta video talsant. Todation. Remember. In remember. I didn't talk it. And it added ever. 1 2. 80 22 3. Happened taking 9. Wyke. Divot. Intention. H racks. And to though. Ever. Aver day. A valid. A.S. My conlet everyone. And any 500 ever presented. It's not friend. On a day. On there. And devited. Tellinity. And actually with things of explain. Action 1. And it is utter. Ever. Exountly dated. Asked. Askus. In the rated on the res. At a state or path. Actional discret friending it. And I won. In the monish. And ever one. It's a creason. Davity inners. It's a backdated. 1. And half it enough. 10 sure. It's the dated of course. Add of it. Everybody axes. And 10 5. It's another bid. Amani 5. I was. In indizin case. Timing of the slayer. Day there never. After the 7. Axa stand. In 1. Axle is the word. As a 70 forted. Action rough it. At ever tension the paces. 1. And a Clinus. In the moversens. Today. Our existent ported doing a. And helpic. In the resting. On my. Inter not mistivision on the Nazavis did it on time and bring. Into spection. Tell brings or Midases. Any town. Is not of the santing. An effect. In times 2 ire. Something the tappy and the time. And tell did night. And today. In televerus. Diet comses. Every port man. Adavin. Tinal visiter. Axtund. Exapadet. Edamadet. Intalingtelevid I tendat. Alder en dollars. Antainses nen. Life talinged. Indiscreem. If you us. Number 1. Intinas apacid. It's notling. Is about of the start of igitted. Axspent. And has prized. Anno. Absidit. It's not no. It's dusted. Interprocess. It's not ponix. 8. And devaver 1. 18z. Right Aiden. Fem. Knoll bills. Clasping them between were fingers. Chef lung them into Catherine. Sface. Thwop. Thwop. The bills struck Kate. Schkeken scattered across the floor. Catherine couldn't. T-move. Asifirantir body hattern to stone. 15,000. That's payment for your 3 years of servitude. Her mother-in-law's voice was full of mockery. And that's generous. Your impoverished relatives could live on that for months. Haha. Catherine slowly lowered her head and looked at the floor. 3 $5,000 bills lay haphazardly on the marble floor. The light from the crystal chandelier reflected coldly in them. In Catherine's pupils, those bills were clearly reflected. 3 years flashed before her eyes. Winter nights when she washed clothes until her hands cracked. The tears she swallowed while scrubbing her mother-in-law's back. Dawns, when she worked late into the night on papers to help her husband with his promotion. And all that life was worth just $15,000. The corners of Catherine's lips twitched. It was a smile. Not anger, not hurt, but a cold, icy smirk. Catherine slowly bent down and picked up the money from the floor. 1, 2, 3. She carefully smoothed out the crumpled bills in her palm. That's right. Money is money. You have to pick it up, her mother-in-law sneered. Poverty can't be fixed. Catherine raised her head. At that moment, Sharon Ann instinctively recoiled. Catherine's gaze had changed. It was not the submissive, head-bowed daughter-in-law she had seen for 3 years. It was a cold, sharp, utterly alien gaze. Catherine spoke. I will definitely return this money to you later. Her voice was quiet but clear. A calm voice, without a single tremor. A look of bewilderment flashed across her mother-in-law's face. How dare you be rude to me? I'm not being rude, mother, Catherine said, folding the bills and putting them in her pocket. It's a promise. I will definitely return them. Catherine said nothing more. She turned and went to her room. Behind her, her mother-in-law's shouts continued, but they didn't reach her ears. Closing the door, Catherine leaned her back against it for a moment. Her heart pounded wildly, but strangely, her soul felt calm, as if a heavy burden that had weighed her down for 3 years had suddenly lifted. Catherine pulled an old suitcase from the depths of the closet. Her hands, packing her things, were steady. A few cosmetic items, a couple of sets of underwear, and a small photograph she had brought with her when she got married. That was all she had in this house after 3 years. At 2 a.m., Catherine left the house. No one saw her off, no one watched her leave. The cold morning air touched her cheeks. Catherine took a deep breath. It was the scent of freedom, which she hadn't felt in 3 years. Catherine took out the folded 3 $5,000 bills from her pocket and looked at them. The corners of her lips slowly curled upward. It was a cold, sharp smirk. Just you wait, mother, Catherine whispered. I'll show you who I am. In the eyes of Catherine, walking into the darkness, a cold fire gleamed. The shadow power broker, who had slept for 3 years, was slowly awakening. A thick morning fog lay over the suburban town of Willow Creek, upstate New York. Catherine dragged her old suitcase down a narrow street. The squeak of the wheels broke the morning silence. At the end of the street, a dilapidated 2-story house appeared, peeling paint on the door, a rusty mailbox. This was Catherine's secret sanctuary, untouched for 3 years. Catherine took a key from under a flower pot and opened the door. The door creaked open, and a musty smell hit her nostrils. Kate switched on the light and slowly stepped inside. The living room, covered in a thick layer of dust, windows full of cobwebs, a space where time had stopped. Catherine put down her suitcase and looked around. She had bought this house back in her days working for the mogul, a refuge she had prepared just in case, for the day she would have to abandon everything. Though she never thought that day would come this way. Catherine entered the bedroom. An old wardrobe stood along the wall, Kate opened the door and fumbled in the far corner. Her fingertips touched cold metal. It was a small safe. Catherine took it out and placed it on the floor. Her fingers, entering the code, trembled slightly. Beep! A green light flashed, and the safe door opened. Catherine, holding her breath, peered inside. There lay a single black leather notebook. Catherine carefully picked it up. There were no inscriptions on the cover, but inside this notebook were recorded secrets capable of shaking all of America. Catherine slowly opened the notebook. On the first page was the name of the head of the country's largest retail corporation. Next to it, a date and a short note. A record of how, 10 years ago, Catherine had handled the case when his son caused a drunk driving accident. On the next page was the name of a real estate developer, managing a slush fund, organizing transfers of funds abroad, halting a federal investigation. There was no case that hadn't passed through Catherine's hands. 20 years of connections with the elite of politics and business were compiled in this small notebook. The corners of Catherine's lips slowly curled upward. There were those to whom she had rendered a service, and those on whom she had compromising information. Both could become her weapons. Catherine closed the notebook and looked into the safe again. An old cell phone caught her eye, an old burner phone. Her special communication line, which she had turned off 3 years ago, deciding to retire. Catherine picked up the phone and long pressed the power button. The screen flickered and slowly lit up. As soon as the loading was complete, notifications poured in. Ding, ding, ding. Catherine's eyes widened at the incessant sounds. On the screen were hundreds of messages and missed calls, accumulated over 3 years. Catherine began checking the messages one by one. Catherine Pavlovna, urgent matter. Please contact me. Catherine Pavlovna. Where are you? Need your help. Catherine Pavlovna, have you retired? I beg you, answer. The senders' names were all prominent. Heads of corporations, congressmen, prosecutors, people who ran America, were looking for Catherine. Catherine, clutching the phone in her hand, looked out the window. It was already dawn. Red rays of the rising sun spread over the river. That red light reflected in Catherine's eyes. For 3 years, Kate tried to live as an ordinary daughter-in-law. She wanted to completely erase her past and start a new life, but they wouldn't let her. They humiliated her for her perceived poverty, mocked her for her humble origins, and finally threw her out like a dog. All right, have it your way. Catherine's gaze turned icy. The ordinary Kate died today. It was time for the shadow power broker, Catherine Pavlovna, to return. Catherine picked up the phone and scrolled through her contacts. Her finger stopped on one name. Victor Anderson, head of the largest retail corporation. 10 years ago, when his son got into an accident, it was Kate who worked all night to settle everything. Then, Victor Anderson, with tears in his eyes, had said, Catherine Pavlovna, I will never forget this favor. Catherine pressed the call button. Before 2 rings had passed, someone answered on the other end. A trembling voice came through the receiver. Hello, is that really you, Catherine Pavlovna? Catherine, smirking, replied, Long time no see, Victor Anderson. I have a request for you. On the other end, heavy breathing was heard. Then Victor Anderson's firm voice sounded through the receiver. Catherine Pavlovna, just say the word. I'll do anything. Catherine looked at the rising sun. The curtain was going up. That same day at lunch, in a private room of a luxurious New York restaurant, Catherine sat by the window, looking out at the street. The black business suit, which she hadn't worn in 3 years, fit her perfectly. There was no trace of the daughter-in-law in a stained apron, standing by the stove, a cold, sharp gaze, proudly straightened shoulders. The very same Catherine Pavlovna, the shadow power broker, had returned. That morning, Catherine had stood before the mirror for a long time. Her hair, which she had worn in a simple bun for 3 years, she carefully brushed and styled. She applied makeup to her dull skin, and a completely different person appeared in the mirror. The confidant who managed all the secrets of an oligarchic clan, the shadowy figure before whom the powerful of the world bowed their heads. The very same Catherine Pavlovna had returned after 3 years. The door opened, and a man entered. Victor Anderson, a man in his 60s, but still strongly built. Hair streaked with gray, a giant who was among the top 5 most influential businessmen in the country, the emperor of retail, managing thousands of employees, a mogul with whom even politicians dared not argue. But the moment he saw Catherine, an expression appeared on his face as if a student had met his long-lost mentor, Catherine Pavlovna. Victor Anderson resolutely approached and stood before Catherine. Then he bowed low. The restaurant staff watched this scene with surprise, the American retail emperor bowing to a middle-aged woman. The personnel exchanged glances, wondering who this woman could be. "Please sit, Victor Anderson." Catherine said it calmly. Victor Anderson cautiously sat opposite her. Joy, mixed with slight tension, could be read in his eyes. 10 years ago, after she handled his son's case, Victor Anderson genuinely respected Catherine. No, he even feared her. 3 years, Catherine Pavlovna. 3 years? Where have you been? I was so worried when you didn't answer. Catherine raised her cup and took a sip. There were personal circumstances. I wanted to rest a little. Rest? Do you know what chaos there was in our circles without you? At the slightest problem, everyone looked only for you. Sincerity resonated in Victor Anderson's voice. Catherine put down her cup and got straight to business. "Victor Anderson, I have a request for you. Just say the word, I'll do anything." He immediately replied, without a shadow of doubt. Catherine slowly began. "There's a man named David Walker. He's currently a nominee for a cabinet secretary position. And there's a woman named Sharon Ann. She owns several properties in downtown New York. Did they do something to you?" Victor Anderson's gaze sharpened. The corners of Catherine's lips slightly curled. "She's my mother-in-law and husband. Or rather, soon-to-be ex-husband." A look of shock appeared on Victor Anderson's face. The hand holding his cup froze. For a moment, he was speechless. Then his face flushed with anger. "I heard you got married, Catherine Pavlovna. But for these 3 years, they treated me like a servant. From dawn till dusk, I took care of household chores, endured humiliation, and last night, they threw me out, flinging $15,000 in my face." Catherine's voice was calm. She spoke as if telling someone else's story. But it was this very calmness that further fueled Victor Anderson's anger. He slammed his fist on the table. "Scum! How dare they treat you like that?" Bam! The cup jumped. Hot tea spilled a little on the table. The waiters nervously turned, but seeing Victor Anderson's furious face, no one dared to approach. "This is simply unthinkable. You've done so much for this country." Catherine motioned to calm him. "Don't worry, Victor Anderson. I'm going to get my revenge, and I need your help. Just say it. I'll grind them into the dirt right now. Tomorrow, they'll be out on the street." Catherine shook her head. "No need to rush. I want to destroy them slowly and surely. To start, dig up everything on them. Property, business connections, all their secrets. Absolutely everything." Victor Anderson nodded. "Understood. I'll deploy my entire security service. In a week, I'll even know the color of their underwear." Catherine smiled contentedly. "Thank you, Victor Anderson. And one more thing. I'm listening. Tell the others that I'm back." Victor Anderson's eyes gleamed. He understood exactly what that meant. The return of the shadow power broker. This news would soon shake the entire American elite. From that evening, Catherine's burner phone didn't stop ringing. The first call was from real estate developer John Smith. 7 years ago, when he faced a federal indictment, it was Catherine who found a loophole for him. If not for her, he would be in prison now. "Catherine Pavlovna, you're alive. I'm ready for anything. I'd give my life for you." Next was former Attorney General Michael Roberts. 8 years ago, his son was involved in a drug scandal, and Catherine quietly handled everything. She saved both his son's future and his own reputation. "Catherine Pavlovna, if you need connections in federal law enforcement, contact me anytime. There are many people there who will do whatever I say." Then came media moguls, bankers, sitting congressmen. At a single call from Catherine, the powerful of the world bowed their heads. Each of them owed her a debt. She saved their lives, pulled them out of crises, concealed deadly compromising information. 20 years of working in the shadows. 20 years of building connections. Now it was time to reap the rewards. Catherine accepted their oaths of loyalty one by one. The deeper the night became, the wider her smile grew. The power she had given up 3 years ago was returning to her hands. Perhaps it had even become stronger than 3 years ago. Debts returned with interest. The next morning, Victor Anderson's first report came in. Catherine Pavlovna, everything as you suspected. Sharon Ann is knee-deep in real estate fraud and tax evasion. Shell corporations were used to purchase buildings. Rental income wasn't declared. If you start digging, there will be hundreds of millions in fines. Catherine, holding the phone to her ear, looked out the window. And this David Walker is even worse. Suspected of a fake degree, traces of bribery. If this comes out during his congressional confirmation hearings, he's finished. Dig deeper. Everything they're hiding will be uncovered. And Catherine Pavlovna, there's another interesting detail. What is it? This David has a mistress. The daughter of a billionaire mogul. The apartment he bought her was paid for from Sharon Ann's slush fund. Mother and son were conspiring behind your back to find your replacement. Catherine's eyes gleamed coldly. Now it was clear why her husband wanted to get rid of her. From the very beginning, she was just a stepping stone for his career. A docile wife from a poor family, a harmless woman who wouldn't interfere with his ascent. And as soon as a better match appeared, he tossed her aside like an old glove. Catherine quietly chuckled. Excellent. Simply excellent. Her voice was calm, but an icy fury simmered within it. Victor Anderson, gather all the evidence. Every single piece. I want the whole world to see what they did, so they don't have a single chance to justify themselves. Hanging up, Catherine looked at the morning river. Calm waves sparkled in the sun, but her eyes didn't reflect this peaceful landscape. In her mind was only one image, the day her mother-in-law and husband would kneel and beg for mercy. Catherine took out the folded 3 $5,000 bills from her pocket and smoothed them out. The morning light fell on the crumpled banknotes. Wait, I'm coming soon. Catherine's whisper was carried away by the river wind. The hunter's net slowly tightened. A week passed. The old 2-story house in Willow Creek had been transformed into a secret headquarters. On the living room table lay a mountain of folders with documents, and on the wall hung photographs of her mother-in-law and husband. Red threads, stretched between them, created a complex diagram of their connections. Catherine studied the documents with a magnifying glass. These were materials sent by Victor Anderson's security service. Property records, bank transactions, call logs. Sharon Ann's and David's entire lives over the past 10 years were laid out in detail. Catherine's eyes gleamed coldly. Everything was far dirtier than she had supposed. It was a root rotten to the core. Catherine, flipping page after page, examined their crimes one by one. First, her mother-in-law's schemes were uncovered. Sharon Ann used to be an ordinary woman who ran a small boutique in a provincial town. But 15 years ago, she suddenly bought a building in downtown New York. No one knew where the money came from. It turned out she used relatives' names to purchase real estate through shell corporations to evade taxes. Property tax, sales tax, inheritance tax, the amount of evasion totaled hundreds of millions of dollars. In addition, she only received rent in cash and did not declare the income. A classic tax evasion scheme. Catherine smirked. She said a daughter-in-law should match the status of a future secretary's family. A tax evader lecturing about status. Catherine's hand, flipping through papers, froze. One photograph caught her eye. Sharon Ann on a golf course with some man. Catherine recognized him. He was a high-ranking official from the IRS. Kate's eyes narrowed. That's why her mother-in-law had managed to avoid tax audits until now. A bribed official was covering for her. This rot is endless. Catherine put the photograph aside. It was valuable evidence. Next in line was her husband, David. His affairs were even worse than his mother's. It was hard to believe that a man who had risen to a cabinet nominee position could be so dirty. First, a fake degree surfaced. In his resume, David claimed a master's degree from a prestigious American university. Thanks to this degree, his career soared, and he eventually became a cabinet nominee. But Victor Anderson's security service found out that David had never attended that university. It was a 100% fake. Catherine, reading the document, sighed. In 3 years of living together, she hadn't known this, or perhaps hadn't wanted to know, because she believed in love. But now, those feelings were gone. Catherine coldly moved on to the next document. It was a list of bribes. David, abusing his official position, received money from several construction companies. The amounts ranged from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. All the money was transferred to accounts opened in the names of shell corporations by his mother-in-law. Mother and son were in collusion. The mother laundered her son's bribes through her tax schemes, and the son, using his power, turned a blind eye to his mother's tax evasion. A perfect symbiosis. Catherine, smirking, murmured, "Impressive. A real organized crime group." At that moment, her phone rang. It was Victor Anderson. Catherine answered. "Catherine Pavlovna, there's additional information. Go on." Regarding David's mistress. Her name is Ashley Davis. She's 32. Daughter of a major corporate CEO. They've been seeing each other for about 2 years. Catherine's eyebrows twitched. 2 years, so he started cheating on her just a year after the wedding. What about the apartment? Yes. A penthouse in an elite New York neighborhood, worth $200 million. Registered to Ashley, but the money came from Sharon Ann's slush fund accounts. We have all the payment documents. A cold smirk appeared on Catherine's lips. In the 2nd year of their marriage, he bought his mistress a $200 million apartment with his mother's money. What a caring son. Hanging up, Catherine stood and walked to the window. The sun sparkled over the river. Fishing boats created a peaceful scene, but there was no peace in Catherine's soul. 3 years. Every day she woke at 5 a.m., cooked, ironed her husband's suits, pleased her mother-in-law. She washed clothes until her hands cracked and scrubbed floors until her knees were bruised. And all this time, her husband was having an affair with another woman, doing it together with his mother in the very house where she was humiliated, picking out a new, more suitable wife for him. Catherine clenched her fists. It wasn't anger. The anger had passed. Now her heart was filled with cold determination, an iron will to make them pay for everything. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock. Catherine opened it, and a familiar face stood on the doorstep. Former Attorney General Michael Roberts. In his hands was a thick folder. Catherine Pavlovna. I brought it personally. Come in, Michael Roberts. Catherine led him inside. When they sat on the sofa in the living room, Michael Roberts placed the folder on the table. David's bribery case. I even got internal federal prosecution materials. With this, he's looking at a minimum of 10 years. Catherine took the folder and looked through it. The sources, amounts, and dates of the bribes were detailed. These were internal investigative materials, accessible only to federal prosecutors. Thank you, Michael Roberts. Don't mention it. If it weren't for you years ago with my son, I wouldn't be here now. Sincerity resonated in Michael Roberts's voice. Catherine nodded and put the folder on the table. May I ask you for one more thing? Anything. Do you know when his confirmation hearings are scheduled? Michael Roberts thought for a moment and replied, As far as I know, next Friday. Why? The corners of Catherine's lips slowly curled upward. An excellent day. What do you mean? The day before the hearings, I'll detonate this bomb. The fake degree, the bribes, the mistress, all at once. Michael Roberts's eyes widened. He understood how cunning her plan was. If the scandal erupted the day before the hearings, David wouldn't just not become a secretary, he'd be thrown out of public office. Catherine Pavlovna, you are as brilliant as ever. Catherine, instead of answering, looked out the window. The sun was setting. The red sunset spread over the river, like blood. Catherine looked at the mountain of folders on the table. Tax evasion, shell accounts, a fake degree, bribes, proof of infidelity. All the sins of her mother-in-law and husband were gathered here. With this, she could completely destroy them. Catherine took out the folded 3 $5,000 bills from her pocket. In a week, they had become even more crumpled. Kate placed them in her palm and looked at them. $15,000. You said that was payment for my 3 years. Catherine's voice was quiet and cold. I promised to return them with interest. A promise must be kept. Catherine put the money back in her pocket and stood up. Everything was ready. All that remained was to take the stage. Catherine looked at the photographs of her mother-in-law and husband on the wall. Wait! Everything will begin soon. Her pupils, reflecting the sunset light, burned red. These were the eyes of a predator cornering its prey. 3 days before the hearings, on Tuesday evening, a grand reception was held in the ballroom of Moscow's most luxurious hotel, the Genesis Foundation's Charity Gala. This foundation united the wives of the most influential people in New York and was considered the most prestigious women's club. Tonight's hostess was Sharon Ann. She had prepared for this event for several months. When her son became a secretary, she, as the secretary's mother, would take her place at the top of the social elite. Tonight was meant to be the prologue to that. A red carpet was laid out at the entrance to the hall. Under the bright light of crystal chandeliers, ladies in designer dresses appeared one after another. Diamond necklaces, emerald earrings, ruby brooches, the jewels sparkled dazzlingly in the spotlights. Sharon Ann sat at the main table in the center of the hall. Tonight she was dressed particularly lavishly. A black evening gown by a famous French couturier, a 3-strand pearl necklace around her neck. Rings with precious stones glittered on each finger. Diamond earrings dangled from her ears. Sharon Ann's face glowed with pride. The daughter-in-law she had thrown out a week ago had long since faded from her memory. She felt she had returned to her rightful place. Only a brilliant future filled her thoughts. "Oh, Sharon Ann, you're simply dazzling tonight." One of the ladies approached her with compliments. Sharon Ann nodded with an elegant smile. "You flatter me. Thank you for coming. When your son becomes a secretary, don't forget to put in a good word for us." Of course, don't worry." Sharon Ann, with the air of a hostess in charge, raised a glass of champagne. Her smile stretched from ear to ear. At that moment, she felt like she was the center of the universe. It was at this moment that a murmur was heard at the entrance to the hall. At first, she paid no attention. Probably another important lady had arrived, but the murmur grew and soon spread throughout the entire hall. "Who is that? My God, look at that dress! Where is it from? And that necklace? Is it real?" Sharon Ann turned her head towards the entrance, and her eyes widened. A woman was walking down the red carpet. A wine-colored, off-the-shoulder dress perfectly hugged her figure, and a dazzling diamond necklace sparkled around her neck. Long hair, elegantly cascaded over her shoulders, and her red lipsticked lips were touched with a faint smile. All eyes were on her, but her face was strangely familiar. Sharon Ann squinted, peering closer, and at that moment, her heart seemed to stop. It was Catherine, the same daughter-in-law she had thrown out a week ago, flinging $15,000 in her face. And she appeared here, looking even more luxurious than Sharon Ann herself. The champagne glass slipped from Sharon Ann's hands. Clink. The crystal glass shattered into 1,000 pieces, but in the general murmur, no one noticed. All eyes were fixed on Catherine. Catherine slowly entered the hall. The heels of her shoes clicked on the marble floor. Every step was full of dignity. There was no trace of the daughter-in-law in an apron with her head bowed. Now, Catherine Pavlovna, the shadow power broker, was here. And then something astonishing happened. Several ladies, sitting in the corner of the hall, seeing Catherine, hastily stood up. They approached her and bowed low. "My God, Catherine Pavlovna, how long it's been since we last saw you. Catherine Pavlovna, where have you been? We were so worried when you didn't answer." Sharon Ann's eyes widened even further. She recognized these women, the wife of the head of the largest retail corporation, the spouse of a real estate developer, the daughter-in-law of the head of a financial group. These were ladies from the highest circle of the Genesis Foundation, and they were bowing to the woman who was her daughter-in-law. What in God's name is happening? Sharon Ann stared at the scene, stunned, her head spun. She couldn't understand why the daughter-in-law, she considered to be from a poor background, commanded such respect. Catherine, after exchanging a few words with the ladies, slowly walked towards Sharon Ann. With each step, her mother-in-law's heart pounded harder. A mysterious smile played on Catherine's lips, cold, sharp, like a predator stalking its prey. Catherine stopped in front of Sharon Ann. Long time no see, mother. Her voice was soft, but an icy coldness permeated it. Sharon Ann moved her lips, but couldn't utter a word. What are you doing here? She barely managed to stammer. Her voice trembled. Catherine, looking around, replied, "This is the Foundation's charity gala, isn't it?" "I was invited too." "Invited? Who could invite someone like you?" Sharon Ann raised her voice. But there was no longer the former imperiousness in her voice, only bewilderment. At that moment, someone approached from behind. I invited her. Sharon Ann turned around and froze again in surprise. It was the wife of the head of the retail corporation, Helena Victoria, the most influential woman in the Foundation. Helena Victoria. "Sharon Ann, you mean you don't know Catherine Pavlovna?" A hint of mockery was in Helena Victoria's voice. Sharon Ann confusedly repeated, "Catherine Pavlovna? Who is she?" Helena Victoria chuckled. "Oh, you really don't know. Everyone in our circles knows Catherine Pavlovna. This is the woman who, for 20 years, managed the secrets of the most influential people in politics and business. She was the confidante in the home of one of the largest moguls. She was called the Shadow Power Broker. There's no one here who doesn't owe her something." Helena Victoria swept her gaze across the hall. Indeed, many ladies nodded and sent Catherine welcoming glances. Sharon Ann couldn't believe it. The daughter-in-law she had treated like a servant for 3 years turned out to be a person who stood above everyone in this hall. She had scorned her for her humble origins, and she turned out to be the shadow power broker, shaping the destiny of the country. Sharon Ann's legs buckled. Catherine, looking down at her, slowly said, "Mother, are you surprised? I'm surprised too. We lived together for 3 years and learned nothing about each other." Why did you hide this?" Sharon Ann asked with a trembling voice. Catherine shrugged. "I didn't hide it, I just didn't say." "You never asked, did you? You weren't interested in my past. You only knew my family was poor." Sharon Ann's face flushed. It was true. She only knew Catherine was from a poor family and had never once asked what she used to do. It hadn't interested her. She had simply despised and humiliated her for her humble origins. Whispers started among the ladies. "My God, this woman is Catherine Pavlovna's mother-in-law. To have such a daughter-in-law and humiliate her. They say some people can't tell a diamond from a glass bead." The whispers grew louder. Sharon Ann's face alternated between red and pale. Where was her pose as the queen of high society now? Catherine took another step forward. "Mother, you're having a very lavish evening tonight. Did you organize all of this?" Yes. "Why? And these jewels for the auction too?" Sharon Ann's eyes widened. In the corner of the hall, jewels for the charity auction were displayed on a stand. Sharon Ann had personally prepared them. "What business is it of yours?" The corners of Catherine's lips slowly curled upward. "I'll tell you about it soon. Just wait a little." Saying this, Catherine turned around. She walked through the crowd of ladies, exchanging greetings. Everyone approached her and bowed the very daughter-in-law whom Sharon Ann had despised for 3 years. Sharon Ann, watching this, felt her teeth clatter. Something had gone wrong, completely wrong. But what could she do now? She forced herself to smile, trying to maintain her composure. But Sharon Ann didn't know. The real storm had not even begun. Catherine stood in the corner of the hall with a glass of champagne. The golden liquid sparkled in the light of the chandeliers. Looking at it, Catherine whispered, "Well, it's time to begin." A cold fire gleamed in her eyes. Tonight, this brilliant evening would turn into pure hell. The evening was in full swing. Laughter and clinking glasses resonated everywhere. Ladies showed off their jewels and engaged in polite conversation, but everyone felt that the atmosphere had changed. With Catherine's appearance, the center of the evening had shifted. Sharon Ann found herself in a corner. The ladies who had recently surrounded her and flattered her were now crowded around Catherine. Sharon Ann's face was stony, and the glass in her hand trembled slightly. At that moment, the host took the microphone. "And now, ladies and gentlemen, the highlight of our program, the charity auction." On the stand in the corner of the hall were displayed luxurious jewels, a diamond necklace, an emerald brooch, a sapphire bracelet. Sharon Ann had specially prepared all of this for this evening. Sharon Ann's expression brightened slightly. She was confident in these jewels. She had personally selected them from the best jeweler. If the auction went successfully, she could at least partially wash away today's disgrace. First lot, the Starry Night diamond necklace. 3 carats, starting price, $5 million. The host's voice echoed through the hall. A whisper went through the ladies. Some were already ready to raise their hands. And precisely, at that moment, "A moment, please." A calm but clear voice cut through the silence of the hall. All eyes turned to the speaker. It was Catherine. She slowly walked to the stand. What? What is she planning? Sharon Ann cried out in a panic. A bad premonition seized her. But Catherine, ignoring her, approached the stand. Catherine picked up the diamond necklace. In the light of the chandeliers, the stones sparkled. Kate carefully examined it and slowly shook her head. "I want to say something to everyone present." Catherine's voice quietly resonated through the hall. Instant silence fell in the room. Everyone held their breath, waiting for what she would say next. "This diamond is a fake." For a moment, the hall froze. What? What did she say? A fake? What does that mean? A clamor of voices rose. Sharon Ann's face turned white as a sheet. "What are you talking about?" "Lies." "What nonsense!" she screamed, running up. But Catherine calmly held up the necklace. "In 20 years of working in moguls' homes, I've seen countless jewels. Distinguishing real from fake is my specialty." Catherine held the necklace to the light. A real diamond refracts light into a rainbow spectrum, but this one simply reflects white light. This is a typical cubic zirconia. On the market, something like this costs maybe $1,000, no more. Outcries of indignation erupted among the ladies. "My God, it's true. This is fraud." Sharon Ann's face flushed. Her lips trembled. This is all made up. I bought it myself from a jeweler." Catherine smirked. "All right, let's check the others." Catherine began to take jewels from the stand one by one. An emerald brooch, a sapphire bracelet, ruby earrings. She checked them the same way. This is also a fake. And this one. And this one, too. Catherine's cold voice echoed through the hall. Sharon Ann's face turned ashen. "Mother, all these jewels put together aren't even worth $100,000, and you were going to sell them at a charity auction for tens of millions?" Angry shouts rose among the ladies. "She's a fraud. She wanted to deceive us. What a disgrace. And we came to this evening." Sharon Ann cowered under the barrage of accusations. The ladies who had recently flattered her now looked at her with hatred. "No, I was deceived myself. The jeweler deceived me." She tried to justify herself, but no one believed her. Catherine coldly looked down at her and said, "Mother, you can't deceive people with fake jewels, just as you can't live a fake life." Before she finished speaking, something flashed on the large screen in the hall. At first, no one paid attention. They thought it would show a video from the evening, but when an image appeared on the screen, the entire hall gasped in horror. In the photograph were a man and a woman in a hotel room. The man was David Walker, Sharon Ann's son and a cabinet nominee, and next to him was not his wife Catherine, but another young and striking woman. "What is that?" "That's nominee Walker, a cabinet nominee cheating on his wife." The photograph wasn't the only one. Pictures flashed one after another on the screen. They were dining in a restaurant, vacationing abroad, shopping in boutiques, and finally, the decisive shot, they were entering an elite penthouse together. Chaos erupted in the hall. "My God, the cabinet nominee has a mistress. Who is that girl? Someone's daughter." This is the end. Complete end. Sharon Ann stared at the screen, frozen in place. Her legs gave out. She swayed. If she hadn't clutched the table, she would have collapsed to the floor. Catherine, pointing to the screen, said, "This girl is the daughter of a major corporate CEO. She and my husband have been seeing each other for more than 2 years, and this penthouse in an elite New York neighborhood costs $200 million." Catherine turned to her mother-in-law. "But the most interesting thing is that the money for this penthouse was taken from your slush fund account. You bought a house for your son's mistress." Sharon Ann's knees buckled. She collapsed to the floor. With a deathly pale face, she stared at the screen. Her pupils lost focus and wandered. "It's over." A moan escaped her lips. Ladies were already taking out their phones and photographing the screen. This scandal would explode on the internet in a few hours. A scandal about a cabinet nominee's infidelity was the perfect topic for the media. Catherine looked at her mother-in-law sitting on the floor. "Mother, a week ago you told me I wasn't good enough for you, that I didn't fit in with your family." Catherine slowly knelt to look into her eyes. "But who do you think, Mother, is truly not good enough for whom?" Sharon Ann couldn't answer. She couldn't. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't utter a word. Catherine straightened up again. "That's all for tonight, Mother. But this is just the beginning." Catherine turned and walked towards the exit. The ladies parted, forming a passage for her. Like Moses parting the sea, people stepped back before her. At the very exit, Catherine paused for a moment. She turned and looked at her mother-in-law. She saw her sitting on the floor, trembling. Where was that arrogant woman who, a week ago, had flung $15,000 in her face? A bitter smirk appeared on Catherine's lips. "I told you, Mother, I would return that money with interest." Saying this, Catherine left the hall. Behind her, chaos continued. Shouts, murmurs, camera clicks. The lavish evening Sharon Ann had so meticulously prepared had turned into the worst nightmare of her life. Stepping into the hotel lobby, Catherine took a deep breath. The night air filled her lungs with cold, but her soul felt light, as if a stone that had weighed on her heart for 3 years had slowly begun to crumble. But this was not the end. Tomorrow, the press would explode with articles, and the day after tomorrow, the FBI would take up the case. And in 5 days, on the day of the hearings, all her husband's sins would be revealed to the world. Catherine looked at the night sky, black and starless, but she felt that in this darkness, she saw the dawn. "There's one last step," Catherine whispered quietly, and disappeared into the darkness. The blade of revenge was now aimed at her husband's neck. The next morning, the entire country was buzzing. The scandal of cabinet nominee David Walker's infidelity exploded across the internet. Photographs and videos, taken by the ladies at yesterday's gala, instantly spread online. All the top 10 search engine results were filled with keywords related to David. Cabinet nominee, infidelity, mistress, $200, million penthouse, mother's slush fund, fake diamonds. News feeds burst with breaking reports. TV channels vied to deliver sensations. Political journalists rushed between the White House and Capitol Hill, gathering comments. David sat in the living room of his house, watching television. His face was deathly pale. The remote control in his hand trembled. Changing channels was useless. His face was everywhere. The scandal involving cabinet nominee David Walker has shaken political circles. The opposition demands the nominee's immediate resignation. It has come to light that he gifted his mistress an elite penthouse worth $200 million. Questions are arising about the source of these funds, which were allegedly taken from his mother's slush fund. David hurled the remote control to the floor. Damn it, how could this happen? But the infidelity scandal was just the beginning. At 10 a.m., the FBI began its operation. Investigators simultaneously raided David's office and home. A search warrant had been issued. "David Walker, you are under arrest on suspicion of bribery and abuse of power," the investigator in the black suit coldly stated. David shook his head in disbelief. "What? Bribery? What are you talking about? You have the right to remain silent and the right to an attorney. Details will be clarified during your interrogation at the FBI office." The investigators grabbed David's arms. He tried to break free, but to no avail. Handcuffs clicked shut on his wrists. "What do you think you're doing? Who do you take me for?" "I'm a cabinet nominee," David shouted. But the investigators didn't even bat an eyelid. "You were a nominee, not anymore." At those words, David's face contorted. When he was led out of the house, dozens of cameras were already waiting. Flashes, microphones shoved in his face. "Mr. Walker, comment on the bribery allegations. Is your relationship with your mistress true? Are you going to resign?" David, head bowed, got into the FBI car. In the glare of the flashes, his face was utterly broken. Just 2 days ago, He was a step away from a cabinet position, and now he was sitting in an investigative car in handcuffs. At the same time, events were also unfolding in downtown New York. IRS agents pulled up to the building owned by Sharon Ann. A tax audit had begun. Sharon Ann Walker, you are required to come with us to give testimony regarding tax evasion and the use of shell corporations in real estate acquisition. Sharon Ann encountered the investigators in the building's lobby. The shock of yesterday evening had not yet left her face. Dark circles were under her eyes. One hand constantly trembled. Tax audit? What audit? We will be reviewing all your real estate transactions over the past 15 years. We request your cooperation. The investigators spoke coldly. Sharon Ann, feeling weakness in her legs, leaned against the wall. Yesterday's disgrace wasn't enough for her. Now there was a tax audit. In one day, everything had collapsed. By evening, the situation worsened. Her 3 buildings were seized. Her assets were frozen in connection with the tax evasion case. Tenants whispered in panic. Managers ran back and forth. How could this happen? How? Sharon Ann sat on the sidewalk in front of her building, sobbing. Passers-by looked at her with curiosity and whispered, "That's the one with the fake diamonds." And her son, the cabinet nominee, got caught taking bribes. They deserve it. You can't live like that. People's stares burned her. Sharon Ann couldn't lift her head. In the evening, her phone rang. Seeing the name on the screen, she hesitated for a moment. It was her acquaintance, a high-ranking official from the IRS, the very one who had been covering for her. With a trembling hand, Sharon Ann answered, "Hello, Sergeant Peterson?" A cold voice came from the other end. "Sharon Ann, I can't help you anymore." "What? What do you mean, Sergeant Peterson? We had such a good relationship. That's why I'm calling, to warn you. Don't call me on this number again." Click. Sergeant Peterson, dial tone. Sharon Ann stared at the phone in disbelief. Then she frantically began dialing other numbers. Lawyers, congressional aides, business partners, people whose relationships she had maintained with bribes. But the result was the same. "I'm sorry, Sharon Ann. I can't do anything. The situation right now is such that it's best not to get involved. Let's just say we're strangers." Everyone turned their backs on her. Sharon Ann hurled the phone onto the asphalt. The screen shattered into pieces. "Traitors! How much did I spend on you?" she screamed. But it was useless. The power had vanished, and those who had fed off that power had also disappeared. The world was cruel. Meanwhile, David, brought to the FBI office, found himself in a similar situation. In the investigator's office, he demanded his lawyer, a lawyer from a well-known law firm who had covered for him, but there was no connection. Finally, when he managed to get through, he heard shocking words. "I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. Our firm cannot take this case." "What? But I've paid you so much over the years." "That's precisely why I'm telling you. You'd better find another lawyer." The call ended. David collapsed into a chair in the investigator's office. His hands trembled. Just a few days ago, he was a successful and powerful man. A cabinet position was within reach. He planned to marry a billionaire's daughter to gain even more power. And now, he had been removed as a nominee, arrested, interrogated, and he was alone, without a lawyer. Everything had collapsed in one day. One face flashed in David's mind, Catherine, the wife he had thrown out a week ago. When his mother had flung $15,000 at her, he had simply turned away. He remembered her gaze, cold, icy. Back then, he hadn't understood that it was the look of a person who had sworn revenge. "Catherine, you did all this," David hissed through clenched teeth. But what could he do now? It was all over. That evening, the news reported his withdrawal from the nomination. Cabinet nominee David Walker has been withdrawn from consideration. The FBI intends to seek his arrest on charges of bribery and document forgery. The announcer impassively read the news. The screen showed David in handcuffs, head bowed. In the old 2-story house in Willow Creek, Catherine watched these news reports. Darkness gathered outside the window, the sound of river waves carried from afar. Watching her husband on TV, she drank tea. The hot drink warmed her throat. The first stage of revenge was complete. Her husband arrested. Her mother-in-law had lost all her property, power, and connections, which had vanished in one day. But this was not the end. At that moment, Catherine's phone rang. Her husband's name appeared on the screen. Apparently, he had been allowed to make a call during interrogation. Catherine, looking at the screen, pressed the answer button. "Hello?" Her voice was calm. David's trembling voice came through the receiver. "Kate, it's me. Please help me." "You can stop all of this, please." Catherine listened silently. David's voice became increasingly pathetic. "I was wrong. It's all my fault. Let's start over. I'll forgive everything. Just please help." The corners of Catherine's lips slightly curled upward. "You'll forgive?" "Yes, yes, I'll forgive everything." Catherine interrupted him. "You are mistaken." David fell silent. Catherine coldly continued, "Forgiveness should be sought by you, and my husband, David Walker, died a week ago." "Kate, don't call me again." Saying this, Catherine hung up. She put the phone on the table and looked out the dark window. Justice had triumphed. There is always a reckoning for sins. Catherine took a deep breath. A heavy burden, weighing on her heart, slowly lifted. But one thing remained. $15,000. That money had to be returned. Catherine took the crumpled bills from her pocket. 3 $5,000 bills that she had carried with her for over a week. "Almost there," Catherine whispered, looking at the bills. The day of the final judgment was approaching. Another week passed. Her husband, David, was released on bail pending trial. Newspapers wrote that, based on the accumulated charges of bribery, abuse of power, and document forgery, he faced no less than 10 years. The fall of the brilliant cabinet nominee became a spectacle for the entire country. Her mother-in-law Sharon Ann's affairs were no better. Her 3 buildings in downtown New York were seized, and the sum of fines for tax evasion amounted to hundreds of millions. When all her schemes with shell corporations were exposed, she was left with nothing. In one day, she transformed from a nouveau riche to a pauper. That day, it was raining in Willow Creek. Catherine sat by the window, watching the streams of water. With a cup of tea in her hands, she gazed absently at the street. Revenge had been served, but there was still some emptiness in her soul. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock. A loud, insistent knock. Catherine slowly got up and went to the door. Opening it, she saw 2 people in the rain. Her mother-in-law, Sharon Ann, and her husband, David. Catherine squinted. No trace of their former splendor remained. Sharon Ann's hair was soaked and stuck to her head. Deep wrinkles showed on her makeup-free face. Dark circles lay under her eyes. Her clothes were wrinkled and dirty. It was hard to believe this was the same woman who, a week ago, had sparkled in a designer dress at a reception. David looked even worse. It was unclear how he had been released, but he was a shadow of his former self. He had lost so much weight that his cheekbones protruded, and his eyes were red and swollen. No trace of the former confidence of a high-ranking official remained. Catherine, leaning against the doorframe, looked down at them. "What do you want?" Her voice was calm, neither cold nor warm, but simply indifferent. Sharon Ann spoke first. Her voice was hoarse. "Kate." In 3 years, she had never once called her by her name. Always, "Hey, you," or "you." And now, for the first time, she uttered her name. "Please help us. No one else can help us but you." Sharon Ann's voice trembled, and she slowly knelt down. Her knees touched the wet concrete. "I was wrong. It's all my fault. I was so cruel to you for 3 years. Please forgive me, just once." Sharon Ann's head bowed to the ground. Her forehead almost touched the wet concrete. Catherine looked at her without any expression. David also knelt beside her. "Kate, what do you want? I'll do anything. Just save me. If this continues, I'll go to prison for 10 years." Tears streamed from David's eyes. The man who had once treated his wife like a servant, cheated on her, and sought a more advantageous match. Now he was kneeling in the rain, crying. Catherine looked from one to the other. Memories of 3 years ago flashed in her mind. The day she got married, dreaming of simple happiness. She wanted to be part of the family of the man she loved, and she was ready for anything. Every morning she cooked, washed, cleaned. Despite her cracked hands and bruised knees, she never once complained. And what did she get in return? Your food smells of poverty. You're not our kind of people. This is payment for your 3 years of servitude. $15,000 flung in her face, and her husband's indifferent back. Catherine slowly put her hand in her pocket. Her fingertips touched the 3 $5,000 bills that she had carried with her for 2 weeks. They were crumpled and so worn that the paper felt soft. Catherine took out the money, Sharon Ann's gaze fixed on them. Do you remember these, Mother? Catherine's voice was quiet and calm. 2 weeks ago, you threw this money in my face. You said it was payment for 3 years. Sharon Ann's face paled. She remembered. And do you remember what I said then? That I would return them with interest? Catherine slowly bent down. She looked her mother-in-law in the eyes. Interest. Your 3 buildings in downtown New York. That's the interest. Enough, wouldn't you say? Sharon Ann's eyes widened, her lips trembled. Catherine unfolded the 3 $5,000 bills in front of her mother-in-law's face. And this is the principle. Catherine opened her hand. The 3 bills, caught by the wind, fell onto Sharon Ann's face. One on her forehead, one on her nose, one on her knees. Soaked by the rain, they stuck to her skin. Sharon Ann didn't move. She lowered her head, and only her shoulders trembled. It was unclear whether she was crying or laughing. Catherine straightened up and looked at David. And you? David raised his head. His face was wet with tears and rain. There's nothing for me to return to you. In 3 years, I received nothing from you. David's face contorted. Kate, please. All you gave me was indifference and betrayal, so I'm returning the same to you, Catherine said coldly. I don't care what happens to you in prison, just as you didn't care about me for 3 years. David's head slumped powerlessly. He couldn't say anything more. Catherine looked at them one last time. Her mother-in-law and husband kneeling in the rain, the people who had thrown her out like a dog a week ago. Now they were begging her for salvation. But in Catherine's heart, there was no trace of sympathy, no pity, no anger, no sadness, only an empty indifference. Perhaps this was the most terrible revenge. Catherine spoke. Take this money and go to a spa. Sharon Ann raised her head. Her face was streaked with tears and raindrops. Wash away your dirty greed. Catherine's voice was calm. It wasn't my food that smelled, but your rotten souls. From the very beginning. Saying this, Catherine turned around. The door slammed shut. Boom! The heavy sound echoed through the noise of the rain. Behind the door remained 2 people on their knees. The rain continued to soak their backs, but the door did not open again. Catherine returned to the window and sat down. She took a sip of the cooled tea. Bitterness burned her throat. Outside, the rain grew heavier. Listening to the sound of the rain, Catherine closed her eyes. It seemed that the 3 years of resentment, anger, and thirst for revenge were being washed away by the rain. Now, everything was truly over. Catherine took a deep breath, as if a heavy burden had fallen from her soul. Now it's my turn to live for myself, Catherine whispered quietly. The sound of the rain softly enveloped her voice. Revenge had ended, and a new beginning lay ahead. A month passed. A warm spring breeze blew through Willow Creek. Gulls flew over the river, and the town smelled of fried fish. The winter cold had receded, and the world was slowly warming up, just like Catherine's heart. The old 2-story house had changed a lot in a month. The peeling paint had been replaced with new. The rusty gate had also been put in order. In the yard stood flower pots in which spring flowers were blooming. Catherine stood in the yard, watering the flowers. The sun warmed her shoulders. A peaceful smile played on Kate's face. The cold, sharp expression that had been there a month ago had disappeared, replaced by a soft and warm one. At that moment, the gate creaked. Catherine Pavlovna, are you home? It was Victor Anderson. Catherine put down the watering can and went to greet her guest. Come in, Victor Anderson. Has something happened? Just stopped by to check on you. Victor Anderson smiled broadly. They sat at a small table in the yard. Catherine brought hot tea. How are you doing? He asked. Catherine, warming her hands on the cup, replied, just living, peacefully. Growing flowers, reading books. An ordinary life. An ordinary life. Victor Anderson nodded. I know how much you've been through. You need to rest. Catherine shook her head with a smile. I'm not just going to rest. I want to start a new venture. A new venture? Curiosity gleamed in Victor Anderson's eyes. Catherine, looking at the river, continued. For 20 years, I solved the problems of the powerful, but those were all the affairs of big people. Now I want to do something different. Different. I want to help the wronged. Catherine's voice was calm, but a firm resolve was evident in it. There are many people like me in the world, those who have been unjustly wronged and can do nothing, who have no money, no power, and don't know where to turn for help. Catherine put down her cup. I want to solve their problems, using my connections and abilities. Admiration was reflected on Victor Anderson's face. Catherine Pavlovna, you never cease to amaze. An ordinary person after such revenge would simply enjoy life. Catherine shook her head. I thought so too. I thought that after revenge, I would feel relief. But when it all over, there was some emptiness in my soul. Catherine looked at the flowers in the yard, and I wondered, what are these abilities for? Only to get revenge? I don't think so. I think they were given to me to help those who are as defenseless as I was. Victor Anderson nodded deeply. In that case, I will help you. If you need anything, just say the word. Thank you, Victor Anderson, but this time, I want to try to manage on my own. Catherine smiled. That evening, Catherine sat in the living room, flipping through her black leather notebook, the notebook that had held the elite's secrets for 20 years. Names, dates, events that peppered the pages. With this notebook, she could have turned the entire country upside down. Catherine flipped page after page. Memories flashed before her eyes. Nights when she ran around solving problems, moments when the powerful of the world thanked her, bowing their heads. In those days, Catherine was a shadow that silently worked behind the backs of brilliant people. But now everything was different. Catherine closed the notebook and stood up. She went out into the yard and lit a fire in a small brazier. Orange flames danced. Catherine looked at the notebook for a moment. To burn it meant to completely break with the past. It was a statement that she would no longer be the shadow power broker. Catherine took a deep breath and threw the notebook into the fire. The flames began to lick the paper. The black leather cover shriveled. Pages turned to ash. 20 years of secrets flew into the night sky as smoke. Looking at the fire, Catherine smiled. Her soul felt light, as if a heavy burden had fallen from her shoulders. A week later, a small sign appeared on one of Willow Creek's streets. Catherine's consultation. Simple, without frills. But what happened inside was anything but simple. The first client was a local elderly woman. She cried, recounting how her son, after receiving all her property, had put her in a nursing home. Catherine took her hand and listened. A few days later, the elderly woman returned to her home. The second clients were a young couple. They desperately recounted how scammers had taken all their savings. Catherine, using her connections, found the scammers, and the couple got their money back. Third, fourth, fifth clients. Catherine listened to their stories and solved their problems. She didn't take money, only from those who could afford it. She accepted food or necessities as thanks. Rumors spread quickly that an amazing woman lived in Willow Creek, that if you were unjustly wronged, you should go to her, that she solved cases that neither the police nor lawyers could handle. Catherine had a lot of cases, but she didn't get tired. On the contrary, each day was filled with meaning. The opportunity to help someone, the opportunity to wipe away someone's tears. This was Catherine's greatest joy. One evening, Catherine sat by the river, watching the sunset. The red sun slowly sank below the horizon. The sky was painted in orange, pink, and purple hues. Gulls cried as they flew into the sunset sky. Catherine took a deep breath. The scent of the river filled her lungs. The salty, cool wind ruffled her hair. Suddenly, memories of the past came back. 20 years in the shadows of moguls. The days she got married, dreaming of simple happiness. 3 years of humiliation and contempt. The night she was thrown out, with $15,000 flung in her face. And the last month, dedicated to revenge. It had been a turbulent life, but she regretted nothing, because thanks to all of it, she had become who she was. Catherine smiled. Before, she was someone's daughter-in-law, someone's wife, someone's secretary, someone's shadow. She always lived behind the backs of others, for others. But now everything was different. Now Catherine was just Catherine. Not someone's daughter-in-law, not someone's wife, not someone's shadow. Just Catherine Pavlovna, the woman from Willow Creek, who runs a consultation and helps the wronged. And this was the most beautiful life. The sunset disappeared behind the horizon. Stars lit up one by one in the sky. Catherine stood up and walked home. Walking down the street, she hummed to herself. She couldn't even remember the last time she sang. When she approached her house, someone was standing by the gate. It was the same elderly woman with a small flower pot in her hands, the one she had helped with her son last week. Catherine Pavlovna, I grew this in my yard. As a token of my gratitude, the elderly woman shyly handed her the pot. Yellow forsythia bloomed in it. Catherine smiled broadly and took the pot. Thank you very much, dear. I will take good care of it. The elderly woman left, and Catherine placed the pot in the yard. The yellow flowers swayed in the wind. Looking at them, Catherine thought, this is happiness. Nothing grand. No luxurious dresses, no diamond necklaces, no power needed. Just quietly helping someone like this and receiving gratitude in return. This was true happiness. Catherine stood in the yard, looking at the night sky. Stars sparkled, as if blessing her. Catherine quietly whispered, not to be someone's daughter-in-law, someone's wife, but to be simply myself. Catherine, this is the most beautiful life. The wind blew, ruffling her hair. The scent of forsythia wafted through the air. Catherine Pavlovna's new story was just beginning. If today's story has left even a small echo in your heart, I would be glad if you visit here again. If you have the opportunity, leave warm words for the heroine of this story. Perhaps your words will help someone make it through tomorrow. I sincerely wish you good luck today and tomorrow. This has been A Knot in Memory. Thank you.